witnessed a series of endorsements and calls to reject Donald Trump, perhaps most notably from those associated with the last Republican to hold the White House, George W. Bush. His former vice president, Dick Cheney, suggests he will support Donald Trump for president. But Bush's brother and Trump rival, Jeb Bush, they're not on board the Trump train, writing, quote, "In November, I will not vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, but I will support principled conservatives at the state and federal levels." This comes a day after Speaker of the House Paul Ryan said he's just not ready to support Trump either. To that, Donald Trump had this to say.
Paul Ryan, I don't know what happened. I don't know. He called me 2-3 weeks ago. It was a very nice conversation. He was congratulating me. This was before we had the ultimate victory, but he was congratulating me on doing so well. I figured routinely he'd be behind it. And he, the other day, just did a big surprise.
We begin with senior national correspondent John Roberts reporting tonight from Omaha, Nebraska, where Donald Trump just wrapped up a rally a short time ago.
Sandra, in Omaha, Nebraska today, Donald Trump held his second rally since becoming the presumptive nominee. He's on to Washington State for a couple tomorrow. And while Donald Trump is the Republican standard bearer, there are still a lot of questions as to whether or not he can actually achieve the type of party unity that he needs to before the convention and certainly before the November election. But some of those concerns were put to rest today when Nebraska's Governor Pete Ricketts came out in support of Donald Trump today. It's especially important because Ricketts' family had spent millions of dollars bankrolling an anti-Trump super PAC. There was also the endorsement from former Vice President Dick Cheney today. And then there was the former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who said he'd go so far as to be Donald Trump's running mate. At the rally in Omaha today, Donald Trump had kind words for Rick Perry, even though Perry's words last summer for Donald Trump weren't exactly kind.
Rick Perry, as an example, he came in, and I've always liked him. But he's a tough competitor, and he fought hard, and he was rough on me, right? He said, I'm a cancer on the Republican Party. No, that's the bad news. Let me tell you the good news. So yesterday, he endorsed me.
But certainly Donald Trump hasn't won everyone over. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse has reiterated that he will not vote for Donald Trump, no way, no how, and he is encouraging the Republican Party to look for a third option. And Lindsey Graham today said not only would he not support Trump, but that he's not going to the convention at all. Donald Trump was quick to reply to that in a statement saying, quote, while I will unify the party, Lindsey Graham has shown himself to be beyond rehabilitation. And like the voters who rejected him, so will I. The big question, though, will Speaker Paul Ryan support Donald Trump or not? We may find out after a meeting Thursday morning on Capitol Hill. That's when Donald Trump will go to visit Speaker Ryan and several other members of the Republican leadership. Sandra?
All right, John Roberts, thank you. Well, just days before Donald Trump became the presumptive Republican nominee, voters were asked about the issue of party unity and whether Republicans will come together in time for November. The result? About half said no. For their part, Trump supporters say GOP critics need to get behind him or risk losing it all this November. Take a listen.
I think that these guys ought to step up and support the nominee. And if they're not going to support the people that the Republicans nominated, then they need to get out of the Republican Party and admit they're no longer Republican. You're either on the team or you're not on the team.
In the case of Paul Ryan, he is the Speaker of the House. He has an obligation to unify the party. He has an obligation to reach out.
You don't have another choice. So you get behind the choice that you have, whether you personally like them or not.
But should Donald Trump do anything to make that happen?
If, in fact, you're a believer.
Mark Thiessen is a Fox News contributor and former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush. David Wohl is an attorney and Trump supporter. Ben Domenech is the publisher of The Federalist. Mark, I want to start with you first. To Newt Gingrich's point, does Paul Ryan have an obligation to unite and support the nominee of his own party?
Well, it's not Paul Ryan's responsibility to unite the party behind Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump's responsibility. And if he doesn't do it, he's going to lose in November. Let me give you two facts. Donald Trump won 40% of the Republican primary votes in all the primaries and caucuses around the country. That is the lowest percentage that any Republican nominee has had since 1968. So a majority, 60% of Republicans voted for somebody else. Unprecedented. Second fact. 40%, according to a Suffolk University USA Today poll, 40% of Republicans aren't sure whether they're going to vote for Donald Trump or not. Some are thinking about third parties, some are thinking about supporting Hillary Clinton, some might stay home. If Donald Trump doesn't win those people over, change their minds, he is not going to win in November. So Donald Trump needs to stop attacking Paul Ryan and start focus on winning those folks over.
David, in the case of former Vice President Dick Cheney, it wasn't that he had to be won over. He just simply said that historically I've always supported the nominee for my party, and this time will be no different.
Voila, he's doing the right thing. And I mean, Paul Ryan, the interesting thing Thursday is going to be if Paul Ryan expects Donald Trump to come to this meeting with hat in hand, down on one knee, asking how he can amend and change and adapt his policies to those of the establishment GOP, then he's got another thing coming. The voters they put Donald Trump over the top by the largest margin ever. He's going to have something like 11 million votes, the largest of any Republican nominee ever in the history of the GOP. And he's got the votes. He's got the people behind him. He's got the gravitas. And I got to say that if Ryan is going to do the right thing, that he better not expect Donald Trump to come there asking how he can change to what Ryan wants.
All right, so let's talk about that meeting, because, Ben, this is what Ryan has said will take place at that meeting. He says there's going to be a discussion about the kind of Republican principles and ideas that can win the support of the American people this November. What will that discussion really be like between Paul Ryan and Donald Trump?
Well, I think that the truth is here that Paul Ryan is whatever the Republican Congress wants him to be. And in this case, he has stepped forward and given cover to a lot of Republicans who are members of the House right now, who, under his leadership, who have either ideological or electoral reasons not to support Donald Trump right now. And that's, frankly, something that's working. The focus is on him. The focus is not on all these other individuals who are worried that Donald Trump will be running on an agenda that undermines their ability to hold the House Republican majority. That's the concern, that it's the front and center for Paul Ryan right now, and that's why he said what he said. So you can hunt him, you can condemn him, you can set the dogs on him, but he's going to be what the Republican majority needs him to be.
All right, Mark, but let's talk about what we're looking at here, because in addition to former Vice President Dick Cheney saying, basically suggesting that he has, Donald Trump has his support, we also heard from former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who also, by the way, was a one-time rival of Donald Trump. He said he's not a perfect man, but what I do believe is that he loves this country. So how many more GOP bigwigs will we see come out in coming days and weeks?
Yeah, well, Rick Perry apparently wants a job, so that has something to do with it. And of course, Donald Trump loves this country. Nobody questions that. But it's not about the GOP bigwigs again. It's about those voters. What Paul Ryan actually didn't say, I'm not going to support Donald Trump. He actually said, I want to support Donald Trump, but I'm not there yet. That's where 60% of Republicans are. He did not win. It's factually incorrect to say he won by the largest margin ever. He actually won by the smallest margin since 1968. So he has a large number of Republicans who are not sure, as Paul Ryan asked, whether he supports conservative principles, whether he believes in limited government. For example, he just came out, flip-flopped within days of winning. He flip-flopped on the minimum wage. Before, he said during the debates he was against raising the minimum wage. Now he said he's for it. So what else is he going to do?
Right, so David,
what is he come on. Sandra, I got to say, you know, the reality is Paul Ryan has to ask himself, did his constituents put him in power to help Hillary Clinton win the White House this year? I think the answer to that would be a resounding no. And I think the reality is if Paul Ryan continues on this track of not knowing what he's going to do, of not helping Donald Trump get this nomination, then I think that's what he's doing, is he's helping Hillary Clinton get to the White House. And I think ultimately he knows that he either supports Trump or he helps Hillary. And I think that's going to make the choice easier for him. But that goes for all the establishment guys who right now are resisting supporting Donald Trump, because he's the nominee. Get used to it. Get counseling if you have that much trouble with it. But that's the reality. That's where we are.
Republicans to get counseling.
All right. So Ben, how much does this anti-Trump within the party? How much does this end up helping Hillary Clinton?
I don't think that it's going to ultimately matter that much, because I do think that Donald Trump is going to do what it takes to unite the party. It's just that he hasn't really started doing it yet. You saw the reaction to what Paul Ryan said, which was to basically go out and say that he's unqualified, that he shouldn't be the Speaker of the House anymore. I don't think that that's the reaction that one needs to have if they truly want to lead and unite the Republican Party. Instead, you have to basically convince these members of Congress and the other people out there who are currently skeptical about the Trump campaign that they can unite around an agenda that will not undermine behind the current majorities that they have in the House and the Senate. That's something that's going to take some work. It needs doing. Ultimately, I think Donald Trump has a path to victory over Hillary Clinton, but it requires him to take those steps.
All right, David, will the party unite?
Absolutely. You know, it's going to take some while. I mean, they're thunderstruck right now. Let's face it. Nobody thought Trump would win by this majority. Nobody thought he'd win this quickly. We were playing for California. So they are shocked right now. They're shell-shocked. But I think ultimately they're going to get together. People are going to contribute. Everybody who's on board now is going to have a contribution to making this an outstanding, powerful administration, and an administration that's going to beat Hillary Clinton. And that's what's key.
All right, Mark, David, and Ben, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Also tonight, Donald Trump faced a reported $75 million in negative advertising during his nomination, but none were effective enough to stop him from becoming the Republican Party's standard bearer this fall. Media guru Frank Luntz is here to tell us why those ads didn't work and whether Hillary will fare any better. Plus, growing outrage tonight as Obama's foreign policy advisor, Ben Rhodes, admits Americans were deceived on the Iran deal with a little help from the White House's favorite media members. You do not want to miss this discussion. Plus, 3 college students claim to be victims of a hate crime until this video uncovers a much different story about what really went down. Criminal defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh joins us with the twist. All right, breaking tonight, new reports of Republicans gearing up for hard battles in 2016's down-ballot races, especially in contests for the House or the Senate. Majorities the GOP has worked hard to gain over the past 6 years. A Bloomberg headline declaring down-ballot Republicans brace for chance of sharing Trump's ticket. The Washington Examiner says Trump effect on fundraising threatens down-ballot Republicans. And finally, the Washington Post reporting Democrats...
Who should be a VP?
Monica Lewinsky.
Oh! You never know what kind of answers you're going to get when you take to street justice at Trump Tower. Stay with us. Welcome back to Justice. And what a week it's been for the GOP. A presumptive nominee has emerged, and the Republican Speaker of the House says he's not ready to support him. A lot of talk about this with my next guest. Joining me now, Jeff Bewley, General Counsel to the New York State Republican Committee, and Tom Doherty, public strategy firm Mercury LLC. Tom was also Senior Advisor to former Governor George Pataki, and we all work together. All right, so we're all pals here.
We are.
For a long time. All right, now, for the party that usually rallies around its presumptive nominee, there is this incredibly grudging, not even acceptance. Is this the end of the Republican Party?
Well, you really have to look at the primary process, and it's a little hard when the presumptive nominee of our party was Little Marco, Lying Ted, went after George Pataki, went after in a very personal way.
We know George, right? But I mean, so it's not personal. He had to get them out.
Yeah, but going after him on issue after issue is fine. But it got very personal. So, and in Ryan's case, I mean, you really have to say he's a policy wonk. And so seriously, I think that if he had just said, look, Donald says, look, I got to go and talk to him. We got to talk about policy. You get through it and move on.
You know what they're going to talk about? Let me tell you what they're going to talk about. You know it and I know it. It's a shakedown. And don't give me this, Paul Ryan is a policy wonk. Hogwash. Paul Ryan's the guy who comes out and says sanctuary cities are not going to be funded by the federal government and then passes an omnibus budget in the quiet of the night. Get rid of that nonsense.
So
and they want to criticize Donald Trump for not being conservative enough? I mean, who's the one who's voted for all of these budgets that are so left-leaning won't stand up to the Democrats? I'll let you answer, Jeff.
You know, I think Donald Trump ran a brilliant campaign, but it was an irreverent campaign.
Yeah.
And that is making the coalescing around him a little bit more difficult, and it's going to take a little bit longer. Although there are signs that it could come together.
What do you think he and Paul are going to talk about on Thursday?
I do think they're going to talk about policy, the differences that they may have on public policy. I also think that, look, the hardball facts of it is that Paul Ryan has to talk to his membership and say, where and how does this affect your local races? Because at the end of the day, it's his job to remain speaker, right? A good sign for Donald Trump in New York, for instance, Lee Zeldin's seat, right? Zeldin this week came out for Trump. Why did he come out for Trump? clear politics. The polls showed that in that district where Barack Obama slightly won 4 years ago, this time Donald Trump's winning the district. It's pure politics, and that's what they're going to talk about.
But when even Reince Priebus, there is this grudging reluctance. It is amazing. Here's the bottom line: he's our nominee. You know what I think it is? I think it's the establishment is scared to death of Donald Trump because he doesn't owe them a darn thing.
Who is the establishment when you say that?
The elected officials, the Congress that's being held in such low esteem, 18%. All right, the lobbyists, K Street. Do I have to tell you guys about lobbyists?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Look, it's about winning elections. That's what it's always about. It's about who can win. And right now, Donald Trump with an extremely high negative, as you know.
So does Hillary. So what? They cancel each other out.
But they don't, because the electoral map.
What are you going to do? Change the nominee?
Look, right now, the race always comes down to independent voters, and right now, independent voters, they are moderate in politics and moderate in temperament.
More voters than anyone in the history of Republican primaries. I got to talk to Jeff now. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I think when they meet, Paul Ryan is concerned about the impact of Mr. Trump on down ballot races. Mr. Trump, on the other hand, needs to raise money. So the question becomes, where are all these big GOP donors going to go? And as I look at it, they basically got four choices. One, they can support Donald Trump. Two, they can stop short of supporting Donald Trump but oppose Hillary Clinton. Three, they can ignore the presidential race and send their money to the down ballot races, which quite a few are. Or four, which would be the worst case scenario, they would oppose Trump and or support a third party candidate.
Okay. All right. That's brilliant, because those are the options. But you know what's interesting to me? You've got the big spending fracking family behind Cruz is not going to back Trump. Well, Trump is for fracking. I think energy is going to be a wedge issue this year. I really do. And yet what you've got is a fracking family who won't support him. The Koch brothers are not going to support him. Who else? Charles and David. Is that true?
Look, the Koch brothers have generally, in past, have really focused on electing state Republicans, gaining control of legislators, et cetera, et cetera. Across the board, it is going to be vital for Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton and the money that's coming in for her super PACs. He needs to start getting some of these people that you have mentioned. And at the end, what has hurt him is when a Cruz supporter has felt the wrath of the lying Ted. It's personal.
But Ted did lie. He did lie about Ben Carson getting out of the primary. That's bad stuff.
But continuing that and continuing it, it's time to make peace, right? He
won. Now he's going to make peace.
So make the peace, and don't expect people in 24, 48 hours to say, all right, all forgiven. Give them time. Somebody like that who's been a huge Cruz supporter, I would expect that over time they'll come back into the fold.
What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I think they need to move some of these big donors who are going to, right now, are committing to the down ballot races and not the presidential race, to get them to commit to the presidential race. For example, another Cruz PAC, Keep the Promise PAC, which is Robert Mercer and Kellyanne Conway. Mm-hmm. Kellyanne Conway, I read, made a statement that, well, supporting Donald Trump and opposing Hillary Clinton are two very different things. So they seem to be headed toward, well, they'll get involved. They may not say they like Donald Trump, but they'll say they're against Hillary Clinton. So that's helpful. So they're trending in the right direction.
But what's a day without a rationalization, huh?
But the good news for your candidate, Donald Trump, is that right now, both Democrats and Republicans at the congressional level say he's not affecting down ballot.
Okay. Tom Doherty, Jeff Bewley, my friends, thanks for being with me.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. And to your mom, too.
Thank you.
And anyway,
This is Joe Wayne with the Anti-COINTELPRO Show and InstinctForSurvival.com. And this is the truth about the traitor, Paul Ryan. That's right. This is the truth of exactly why he is going to, hat in hand, visit Mr. Donald J. Trump, the leader in the GOP contest for the GOP nomination, the presumptive nominee. He is going there, hat in hand, to beg, that's right, to beg Mr. Trump for his blessing. And why do I say this, folks? Why do I say that I know for sure that one Mr. Paul Ryan is going to beg Mr. Trump for his blessing and for his support? Well, for this very reason, folks. For the very reason, the one ginormous reason that none of the talking heads are talking about. And you just watched two clips. One of the Kelly File stand-in, Sandra Smith, and her panel, and one Justice Janine Pirro and her panel. Now, they all pontificated on what the heck is going on, why Mr. Ryan is being such a traitorous turncoat to his own party and the people's nominee, Donald J. Trump. Now, they all went back and forth, hemming and hawing, and basically talking about everything except for that one big ginormous elephant in the room. And that one big ginormous elephant, folks, is Mr. Paul Noonan. Who is Paul Noonan? I'm sure you guys are scratching your head if you're not a researcher like I, if you're not a political news hound, as I am, as a lot of people are today. Well, if you're not, then you probably have never heard of Paul Noonan. Well, who is Paul Noonan? And why is he the elephant in the room that the mainstream media, the mainstream hack media, why is he the only thing that they're not talking about? Well, Mr. Noonan, number one, he's supporting Trump. He's stumping for Trump. Well, who is this guy that is stumping for Trump? Well, he just happens to be the opponent for one Mr. Paul Ryan's seat in Wisconsin, the 1st district. And as you're looking at now, the 1st district encompasses Kenosha, Rayne, half of Janesville, and half of another county. But this, it's a small district in size, but a very large district in power. And who won this district during the GOP primary in Wisconsin? Who won that district? If you're looking along with me, folks, at the Wisconsin primary results, you will see, that Teddy Bear Cruz, he won Wisconsin with a sizable margin. But if you're looking at the Trump color, which is a watermelon color, opposed to the cranberry color of Ted Cruz's victories, you will note that Ted Cruz's victories came in these the bigger urban areas of Wisconsin, i.e. Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, and alike. Now, where did Trump win his votes at? And if you're looking at it, he won a bigger portion of Wisconsin, the suburbs, the out in the country, right? The middle class, the more of the middle class farm workers, dairy workers in Wisconsin. And it just so happens that he also won over half of the 1st district. So what that says to me, folks, is that his support may be strong among the liberal GOP members in Wisconsin, the urban acolytes of the rhinos there in Wisconsin. Well, he won a lot of the rhinos, yes, but he didn't win the true blue conservatives. He didn't win the Reagan Democrats. Trump won all of those. And this is the reason that on Thursday, And remember this one thing, folks. Remember that the meeting with Donald J. Trump and Paul Ryan came at the behest of Paul Ryan, not of Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump said that he didn't need Ryan's support. And then about a day later, you had Paul Ryan, the Eddie Munster lookalike. You have Paul Ryan calling Mr. Trump and begging for a meeting. Now, Donald, in his move to pivot to a general election, won't tell you this, but I will. The talking heads won't tell you that Mr. Ryan is in a fight for his life for his congressional district, okay? They're not going to tell you that the opponent is a much more affable person. He has much more of an all-American presence than Mr. Ryan does. He looks, basically and seems to be an all-American guy, opposed to the establishment neocon that is Paul Ryan. So the establishment mainstream hack media is not talking about Paul Noonan. They're not talking about Trump winning half of Mr. Ryan's district in the GOP primaries. That's the only thing they're not talking about. And if they're not, that's the one thing that they're really afraid of, right? They're not going to tell you what they're really afraid of. They're going to stay away from it. They're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's how you know exactly what they're afraid of. So if you guys are worried about Donald J. Trump getting support from Ryan, well, that's not what you have to worry about if you're an establishment toad. If you're establishment toads, then what you have to worry about is Mr. Donald J. Trump giving Paul Ryan his support. This is the way that I see it. This is Joe Wayne with the Anti-COINTELPRO Show and InstinctForSurvival.com. Good day.
Perhaps most notably from those associated with the last Republican to hold the White House, George W. Bush. His former vice president, Dick Cheney, suggests he will support Donald Trump for president. But Bush's brother and Trump rival, Jeb Bush, they're not on board the Trump train. Writing, quote, "In November, I will not vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, but I will support principled conservatives at the state and federal levels." This comes a day after Speaker of the House Paul Ryan said he's just not ready to support Trump either. Witnessed a series of endorsements and calls to reject Donald Trump.
Omaha, Nebraska today, Donald Trump held his second rally since becoming the presumptive nominee. He's on to Washington State for a couple tomorrow. And while Donald Trump is the Republican standard bearer, there are still a lot of questions as to whether or not he can actually achieve the type of party unity that he needs to before the convention and certainly before the November election. But some of those concerns were put to rest today when Nebraska's Governor Pete Ricketts came out in support of Donald Trump today. It's especially important because Ricketts' family had spent millions of dollars bankrolling an anti-Trump super PAC. There was also the endorsement from former Vice President Dick Cheney today. And then there was the former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who said he'd go so far as to be Donald Trump's running mate. At the rally in Omaha today, Donald Trump had kind words for Rick Perry, even though Perry's words last summer for Donald Trump weren't exactly kind.
Rick Perry, as an example, he came in, and I've always liked him. But he's a tough competitor, and he fought hard, and he was rough on me, right? He said, I'm a cancer on the Republican Party. No, that's the bad news.
To that, Donald Trump had this to say.
Paul Ryan, I don't know what happened. I don't know. He called me 2-3 weeks ago. It was a very nice conversation. He was congratulating me. This was before we had the ultimate victory, but he was congratulating me on doing so well. I figured routinely he'd be behind it. And he, the other day, just did a big surprise.
We begin with senior national correspondent John Roberts reporting tonight from Omaha, Nebraska, where Donald Trump just wrapped up a rally a short time ago.
Sandra and